For more than a month now, my wife, my mother-in-law, and I have been trying to find school clothes for my daughter. Your first clue that this has not been a simple process is that it's taken us more than a month so far. Your second clue is that it's taking 3 adults to figure it out. My wife and I already knew that finding clothes that fit our daughter well is a challenge, but now it feels like it's gone from climbing a steep hill challenging to jumping a motorbike over 6 buses that are also on fire challenging. The issue is that in spite of what the people who make girls' clothes seem to think, not all girls are the same shape. It's not hard to see that. Out of our daughter's friends who are all about the same age, some are shorter, some are taller. Some of them are stockier and some of them are skinnier. And those 2 characteristics are not related. Her friends have never been all the same shape. And that's even more true now that they're pre-teens. My mother-in-law had us measure our daughter to give her numbers for chest, waist, height, hips, and inseam. Then my mother-in-law ordered a shirt, a skirt, a pair of pants, and a pack of socks for our daughter to try on. Except for the socks, none of them fit. My wife tried another place and got 2 pairs of boys' pants marked with exactly the same size. One pair almost fit, but the waist wasn't quite big enough. The other pair of supposedly the exact same size fit her waist, but they were way too long. Our daughter had to hike them up, or else it looked like when she was a baby and had a full diaper. So on Friday, fed up with this ridiculous guessing game, I took her to Kohl's and we looked at men's pants. I understand men's pants. And I don't think it's just because that's what I wear. Men's pants have 2 numbers, waist and length, and that's in inches. And you can get them in most combinations. None of this looking at some chart to figure out that the size we need is called 20, and yet even the same place can call different pairs of pants size 20, but they still don't actually fit the same. I found 2 pairs of men's pants for my daughter, and the waist is good, and the length is good, and neither makes her look like she has a full diaper. Oh, and in trying them on, she was amazed at how deep the pockets were. Yes. I posted about this on Facebook, that I had to buy men's pants for my daughter because children's sizes and women's sizes make no sense. And I got a lot of comments, all from women, that yes, they buy men's pants too, for the fit and yes, for the pockets, and they're usually cheaper. All of this is an example of inequity and clearly sexism. All people should be able to find clothes that fit them, fit comfortably, and look good. Obviously, that's not going to happen if it's assumed that everybody's body is the same shape or that everybody likes the same style. Clothes are supposed to be made to fit actual people, not the other way around, and people in all sorts of shapes and sizes. It's a matter of respecting people, honoring their differences, treating them equitably, and making our society accessible and inclusive for everyone. One of the values that's been proposed for the updated covenant of the Unitarian Universalist Association is equity. The Article 2 Study Commission, which was charged with developing this new covenant, has offered this language in regard to equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Now, there are a few different meanings of the word equity. This isn't equity in a financial sense, like home equity. It isn't equity in a legal sense, what is called chancery. And it isn't equity in the sense of the labor union of actors and others in the theater. Rather, this is equity in the sense of fairness, specifically in terms of removing barriers to equal opportunities. Equity is about equal access. It's not the same as equality, which is simply treating everyone as if they were the same. Rather, it's treating people for who they actually are. Remember a couple of weeks ago when I mentioned the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule? The golden rule says to treat others the way that you would like to be treated. This is treating everyone equally, as if they were the same as you. The platinum rule, on the other hand, says to treat others the way that they would like to be treated. That's equity. Let's look at a picture showing the difference between equality and equity. If you'd put it on the screen, please, Jeffrey. On the left, we have a representation of equality. All three people are standing on the same size box. However, the three people themselves are not the same. The tallest person and the middle height person can see over the fence, but the shortest person cannot. The remedy is fairly obvious. For all of them to be able to see over, the shortest person needs more than one box, and the tallest person doesn't really need a box at all. So on the right, we have a representation of equity. Each person has the number of boxes they need, and all of them can now see over the fence. Now, this looking over the fence scenario is rather contrived, and it's unfortunately given fodder to people opposed to actual equity and justice in society, particularly those who are opposed to what are called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. If people are being charged admission, for instance, to get into the stadium and watch the game, for example, then isn't watching it for free over the fence a form of theft? Now, no metaphor is ever going to be perfect, but this one is a little better. If you can move to the next picture, please. This is the first in a set of pictures, and it starts with inequality. One side of an apple tree has lots of apples. So the person on that side of the tree gets lots of opportunities to catch apples as they fall. The person on the other side of the tree doesn't get those opportunities. This is inequality because it's unequal access to opportunities. Next picture, please. The second picture in this series shows equality with a question mark. Each person now has a step ladder and a collection bag, the same tools, but because the tree leans to one side, only the person on that side of the tree can reach the apples. This is equality in the sense of evenly distributed tools and assistance, but it's still unequal access to opportunities. Next picture, please, Jeffrey. The third picture shows equity. The person who needs a taller step ladder to reach the apples now has a taller step ladder. So both people are able to pick apples. This is equity thanks to custom tools that identify and address inequality. And there's one more picture in this sequence, if you'd move to it, please, Jeffrey. The fourth picture shows justice. Now the tree is shored up so that it doesn't lean, and both people can use the same height step ladders to reach the apples. This is justice in the sense of fixing the system to offer equal access to both tools and opportunities. Now again, this is somewhat contrived. What's to stop both people from going around the same side of the tree? Why can't they work together? And is it really good for the tree to be forced into another shape? So I have one last picture to show you that explains the difference between equality and equity using what I think is a more realistic, less contrived scenario. Jeffrey, if you'd move to the next picture, please. On the top, we have equality, with 4 people given bicycles. All 4 bicycles are identical, but again, the people themselves are not. The bicycle is only really sized for the middle height person who can ride it comfortably, but the tallest person is all hunched up, and the shortest person is having a hard time reaching the pedals. And the person in a wheelchair, they can't even ride a bicycle. On the bottom then, we have equity. Now each person gets what fits them. The tallest person gets a bigger bicycle. The shortest person gets a small bicycle. The person who was in the wheelchair is now pedaling a tricycle by using handlebar pedals. This is equity, not because they're given the same bicycles, but because they now have the same opportunity to ride. Thank you, Jeffrey. You can stop sharing your screen now. This is the point of the inclusive playgrounds that Cody Goldberg designs. Different children have different abilities, so you can't design a playground that's supposed to be for everyone if some of the design choices exclude some of the children. And the same is true of any society we build. Different people are, well, different. So if you want society to include everyone, it cannot exclude anyone on the basis of any difference. As clinical psychologist Arthur Chan puts it, diversity is a fact. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action, and belonging is an outcome. The Universalist side of our faith has taught us that every person has inherent worth and dignity. This is why our old UUA Covenant called us to practice justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And it's why our proposed new UUA Covenant identifies equity as a UU value that calls us to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Jeffrey will also put each question on the screen as I ask it. I wonder how you understand the inherent worth and dignity of each person. I wonder how you would describe your own differences from other people. I wonder what you could do to make our community more accessible and inclusive. I wonder what equity means to you as a Unitarian Universalist value. Other than love being at the center of the proposed UUA Covenant, the values are not ranked in any particular order. You can start anywhere on the flower of values and go clockwise or counterclockwise or any other way you want. If you need help remembering the values, there are various mnemonics like lit JPEG LITJPEG, or love, JETPIG, love, JETPIG. So after considering these 7 values over the last 7 months, we don't come to equity because it's last. The order I preached on them mostly came from what was already on the calendar for each month. Rather, you can think of equity as completing our journey through the values since February. And since we've already talked about love and generosity and justice and transformation and pluralism and interdependence, now we can think about how equity fits in with them too. So I'm going to ask you to take a couple of minutes to do just that. Think to yourself about how equity takes its place as a value within Unitarian Universalism. How does it fit with love? How does it fit with justice, with generosity? How does it help us to belong, to get to beloved community? So please take a couple of moments now to reflect on these things by yourself, and then Solstice will invite us into a time of sharing. Some of you may be familiar with Harrison Bergeron, a satirical short story by science fiction writer Kurt Vonnegut, who in his 1984 Ware lecture said he would tell strangers he was a Unitarian Universalist in order not to seem spiritually inept. His father and grandfather were Unitarians, and they even designed a church building for All Souls UU in Indianapolis. Anyway, Vonnegut's short story is set in the year 2081, which isn't as far away as it used to be, when the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution finally make all Americans fully equal by prohibiting anyone from being smarter, better looking, or more physically able than anyone else. Strong people must wear bags of weights. Intelligent people must wear earpieces that randomly blast noise. And attractive people must wear masks. Everyone is forced to be equal. The title character, Harrison Bergeron, is an extraordinary young man who breaks out of prison and into a TV studio, rips off everything impeding his abilities while declaring himself emperor, and is ultimately killed by the government's chief enforcer of the equality laws. Vonnegut's satire is about taking equality to an extreme, with his future society forcing anyone above average in any way to be artificially impeded so they're no better than anyone else. Going back to the picture of the people trying to look over the fence, this would be like forcing the tallest person to stay seated and digging a hole for the middle height person to stand in both cases making them just as unable to look over the fence as the shortest person. In that sense, all 3 people are equal, but it's the complete opposite of equity, forcing people down instead of helping people up. For everyone to have the right to flourish, equity is the dismantling of barriers that prevent people from becoming fully themselves. Equity is not about making everyone the same. It's about allowing everyone equal access to be included in society, to belong to the beloved community as they truly are. Obviously, we have a long way to go as a society, with the recent Supreme Court ruling ending affirmative action as a tool of equity to address racial inequality, not to mention various state decisions that prevent public education from even recognizing the existence of anyone other than straight, white, cisgender people. Our faith has long called us to practice equity, both within and beyond our walls, even if we haven't always named it as such, even if we haven't always got it right. It's why our greeters and ushers work so hard to welcome people on Sunday mornings. It's why we've made our doorways and bathrooms as accessible as possible. It's why we reserve sanctuary seating for people using wheelchairs and their companions, as well as newcomers. It's why we list the ingredients of salads, the soups, the food we've baked, and the dishes we bring to share. And our desire for a more equitable society is why we witness for racial justice and demonstrate for civil rights and show up for pride. It's why we collect food and money for the food bank. It's why we work for environmental justice and a healthy environment for everyone. The proposed Article 2 language makes this explicit. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. May this be how we live our faith, with justice, equity, and compassion for everyone.